In the early hours of September 2025, a shadow fell across the waters of Lake Maracaibo. It was not a storm cloud. It was a massive steel structure towering over the Venezuelan coastline. The Alula, a floating drilling platform, had completed its long journey from the shipyards of Zhoushan, China. To the untrained eye, this is simply an oil rig. But to those of us who study the grand chessboard of global power, it is something far more dangerous. It is a geopolitical weapon. It is a flag planted in the heart of the Western Hemisphere, and it marks the definitive end of the Monroe Doctrine. For 200 years, the United States has operated under a simple principle: the Americas are our backyard. Foreign powers are not welcome here. We enforce this with diplomacy, with economics, and when necessary, with force. But today, that doctrine is dead. It wasn't killed by a nuclear missile or a carrier strike group. It was killed by a $1 billion contract signed in a boardroom in Beijing. China has not just entered our sphere of influence. They have built a fortress within it. And the terrifying truth is that we let it happen. We were so focused on sanctions, on freezing bank accounts, on diplomatic pressure. We thought we could starve the Venezuelan regime into submission. But while we were playing checkers, China was playing Go. They didn't try to fight our financial system. They simply built a new one. Today, we are going to expose the mechanics of this defeat. We are going to look at the China Concord Resources Corp deal. We are going to analyze the renovation of the Puerto La Cruz refinery. And most importantly, we are going to confront the existential threat of the Petroyuan. This is not just about oil. This is about the future of the American dollar and the stability of the American empire. Let's begin with the tactical brilliance of Beijing's approach. In the past, when China wanted to project power, they used their massive state-owned enterprises. Companies like CNPC or Sinopec. These giants are powerful, but they are also slow and politically radioactive. When a Chinese state company buys an asset in South America, it triggers alarm bells in the Pentagon. It invites immediate sanctions. So this time, they changed tactics. They used a proxy. Enter China Concord Resources Corp, or CCRC. Technically, it is a private company. It flies under the radar of traditional state-level sanctions. It operates with the agility of a Western corporation, but with the strategic backing of the Chinese state. In May 2024, CCRC signed a deal that Washington said was impossible, a 20-year production sharing agreement to take over the Lagos Cinco and Lagunillas fields. These are not just any fields. These are the historic heart of Venezuela's oil wealth, and the terms of the deal are a masterclass in gray zone warfare. China provides the capital, $1 billion. China provides the technology, the Alula rig, and in exchange, China gets the oil. But here is the critical part. This is not a transactional relationship. It is an integration. By committing to a 20-year timeline, China is telling the world that they are not just visiting Venezuela, they are staying. They are embedding themselves into the critical infrastructure of the country, and they are fixing the one vulnerability that the United States has always exploited. For decades, the Achilles heel of the Venezuelan oil industry was its refineries. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, but their crude is heavy and sour. It requires complex processing. Their refineries, built with American technology in the 20th century, were falling apart. This gave the United States a kill switch. We could cripple their economy simply by stopping the export of diluents and gasoline. We could turn off the lights in Caracas without firing a shot. But that kill switch has been disconnected. Quietly, methodically, Chinese engineering firms like Wyson Engineering have been on the ground. They have spent the last 4 years renovating the Puerto La Cruz refinery. They stripped out the American tech and replaced it with Chinese systems. They installed the deep conversion technology needed to process heavy crude. And as of 2025, that refinery is back online. It is processing 210,000 barrels per day. Do you understand the gravity of that number? It means Venezuela is now energy independent. They can refine their own gasoline. They can power their own tanks and trucks. They no longer need American fuel to survive. We can sanction them all we want. We can block every tanker in the Gulf of Mexico. It doesn't matter anymore. The strategic leverage of the United States has evaporated, but the loss of leverage in Venezuela is just a symptom of a much larger disease. The real threat, The one that should keep every American awake at night is financial. It is the rise of the Petroyuan. Since 1974, the global order has been built on a deal struck between the United States and Saudi Arabia. We provide security, they price oil in dollars. This system, the petrodollar system, effectively forces every nation on earth to hold U.S. currency. It creates an artificial, endless demand for the dollar. It is the secret sauce that allows us to run $34 trillion in debt without collapsing into hyperinflation. We export our inflation to the rest of the world because the world needs our money to buy energy. But what happens when the world's largest importer of oil stops using the dollar? We are watching it happen right now in Venezuela. Intelligence reports and trade data confirm a staggering shift. 72% of the oil trade between China and Venezuela is now settled in Renminbi. This is not a pilot program. This is a new reality. China pays CCRC in yuan. CCRC pays the Venezuelan government in yuan. Venezuela uses that yuan to buy Chinese machinery, Chinese electronics, and Chinese weapons. It is a closed loop, a sanction-proof ecosystem. The money never touches the SWIFT banking system. It never passes through the Federal Reserve in New York. It is completely invisible to the Office of Foreign Assets Control. This renders the primary weapon of modern American warfare, the financial sanction, completely obsolete. Think of sanctions like a toll booth on a highway. They only work if everyone has to drive on that highway. China has just built a bypass road, and traffic is flowing freely. This sets a terrifying precedent. If Venezuela can successfully de-dollarize its oil trade, who is next? Iran is already doing it. Russia is already doing it. But the real nightmare scenario involves the BRICS alliance. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have joined BRICS. They are watching this experiment in Venezuela very closely. They see that China can provide the technology to extract oil. They see that China can provide the military hardware to protect the regime. And they see that China offers a currency that cannot be weaponized by Washington. If the Gulf states decide to accept UN for oil, the petrodollar dies. And if the petrodollar dies, the American economy as we know it ceases to exist. The demand for our debt will vanish. Interest rates will skyrocket. Import prices will double or triple. Our standard of living will collapse. This is not hyperbole. This is basic monetary mechanics. And the administration knows it. That is why we saw the desperate move in April with Executive Order 14,245. President Trump, recognizing the threat, signed an order imposing a 25% tariff on goods from any country importing Venezuelan oil. It was a show of force. It was designed to punish China for daring to break the blockade. But in the world of high-stakes geopolitics, it was a Maginot Line. It was a defense built for a war that is no longer being fought. Let's analyze why this executive order is a strategic failure. First, it assumes that China cares about a 25% tariff more than it cares about energy security. That is a fatal miscalculation. China imports 10 million barrels of oil a day. They are the world's factory. Without oil, the Chinese Communist Party collapses. They view energy access as an existential issue. They will pay any price, absorb any tariff to secure that flow. A 25% tax is a nuisance to them, not a deterrent. Second, the tariff hurts us more than it hurts them. As we discussed in previous briefings, tariffs are paid by the importer, by the American citizen. We are essentially taxing ourselves to protest a Chinese policy that we cannot stop. It drives up inflation at home, weakening our economy, while China continues to buy the oil anyway. And third, and most importantly, the order is unenforceable in a de-dollarized trade. How do you track a transaction that happens in yuan on a private Chinese ledger between two entities that don't report to Western auditors? You can't. You can use satellite imagery to see the tankers moving, sure, but you cannot prove the financial transaction in a court of law without access to the banking data. And China isn't sharing that data. So we have a situation where the US president signs a piece of paper and Beijing laughs. They know we have run out of ammunition. This brings us back to the Alula rig in Lake Maracaibo. It is a monument to the failure of American foreign policy in the 21st century. We spent 20 years fighting wars in the Middle East, chasing terrorists in caves. Meanwhile, China was building ports, railways, and refineries in our own hemisphere. We focused on kinetic warfare. They focused on economic warfare. And now they have encircled us. Look at the map. China controls the Panama Canal ports at both ends. China has a deep water port in Peru at Shanghai. China has a space tracking station in Argentina. And now they control the energy heart of Venezuela. The noose is tightening. The Monroe Doctrine wasn't just a statement of arrogance. It was a recognition of strategic reality. To be a global superpower, you must first be secure in your home region. You cannot project power across the Pacific if you are vulnerable in the Caribbean. By allowing China to entrench itself in Venezuela, we have given a hostile power a forward operating base. Imagine if the United States built a massive oil rig in the South China Sea, right off the coast of Shanghai. Imagine if we started paying for that oil in dollars, bypassing Chinese currency controls. Beijing would view that as an act of war. They would sink that rig. Yet we watch the Alula arrive and we issue a press release. We slap on a tariff. We act as if this is business as usual. It is not. This is a fundamental realignment of the global balance of power. The world is splitting into two distinct blocks. On one side, the G7, led by the United States, clinging to the dollar system. On the other side, the BRICS+, led by China, building a commodities-backed hard asset system. Venezuela has made its choice. They have chosen the East, and by doing so, they have provided the blueprint for every other rogue nation to escape American influence. The sanction-proof ecosystem is now operational. It has been field-tested in Caracas. It works, and you can bet that Moscow, Tehran, and Pyongyang are taking notes. So what does this mean for you, the American patriot and investor? It means you need to understand that the rules of the game have changed. The era of effortless American supremacy is over. We are entering a period of intense resource competition and currency volatility. The government cannot protect the value of your dollar in this new environment. They will try to inflate away the debt. They will try to implement capital controls. They will try to distract you with domestic political squabbles. But the real action is happening on the high seas and in the oil fields. You need to think strategically about your own assets. If the petrodollar weakens, hard assets rise. Gold, silver, land, energy commodities. These are the things that hold value when paper currencies are used as weapons of war. Do not be lulled into a false sense of security by a booming stock market. The stock market is denominated in dollars. If the dollar loses 20% of its purchasing power against energy, your stocks have effectively crashed, even if the numbers go up. This is the illusion of nominal gains. The Alula rig is a warning shot. It is a signal that the siege of the American economy has begun. We are not fighting a conventional war with tanks and planes. We are fighting a war of attrition, a war of supply chains, a war of currencies, and right now we are losing. I want you to share this intelligence. Most people are completely asleep at the wheel. They see a headline about Venezuela, and they turn the page. They don't see the connection to their savings account. They don't see the threat to their national security. It is our job to wake them up. The world has changed. The Monroe Doctrine is history, and the fight for the future of the West is happening right now in the murky waters of a South American lake. In my next briefing, I will be shifting focus to the other side of this pincer movement. While China secures the oil, they are also making a massive move in the gold market. I will uncover the data on central bank gold purchases and explain how this links directly to the death of the petrodollar. It is the second half of the strategy, and it is even more aggressive than the oil deal. You need to see the full picture, stay vigilant, protect your freedom, and never stop watching the horizon. I am the Watchman. I will see you in the next briefing.